Hey everybody, today we have a special guest that I'm very happy to have him. He's a new dad. Actually, he was already a dad of two, but he got a new baby. He is one of the most or the best MMA journalists in MMA in the business. Since 2010, he's the MMA journalist of the year. He's from Montreal. He's Canadian. This is Ariel Helwani. How you doing, Ariel?
I'm doing great, Patrick. Thank you so much for having me. It is an honor for me.
It is an honor for me too, man. We know your show, the MMA Hours. We know that you all the respect of the community, and it's amazing to have you on our show. That we're gonna break down some fights later. But first of all, I want to talk to you about yourself. That you're from Montreal now. You live in New Jersey. Do you come back sometime in Montreal? Do you come back in the country sometime?
Yeah. Well, my wife is actually from Montreal, so we met when we were 12 years old, going into the 7th grade, and so her family lives there. My family still lives there, and now that we have children, we like to go back and see our grandparents. And my sister lives there. Her entire family lives there. So yeah, I'm very, very proud of my Canadian and Montreal roots. And if I'm being honest, a part of me wishes I still lived there, because I feel like it's such a great place to grow up. It's such a great place to raise children. But for now, I'm in the United States, and I'm happy here as well. But I'll always try to go to Montreal at least 3-4 times a year. I wish the UFC would go back more often, because that was always a good excuse. But for now, I just go to visit my family.
Yeah, maybe you should talk to George to me, because he doesn't want to go back on my podcast. Maybe you have a better chance to me. But yeah, we can see that on your Twitter picture. You wear the Montreal Expo baseball cap, so you are a big fan of the Montreal city here. So that's awesome. And you're talking about kids. You just got a new baby, so congratulations to that. It's a baby girl, right?
Yes, it is a baby girl, and congratulations to you as well. You just had your first, right?
Yeah, I just got my first. You got 3, so maybe I'm going to call you to have some advice or something like that later.
How is it going for the first time? Are you tired? Are you feeling good?
No, it's pretty good. I was ready for that, and it's a life-changing, but it's amazing. This is probably the reason why you got another one, because that's an amazing experience.
Yeah. I couldn't say enough good things about it. Now I have 2 boys and 1 girl, so we're really happy. And she's actually a week old today, so she's it's just amazing. We were expecting a 3rd boy, and we didn't know what we were going to have, and then it was a girl, and we were so happy. So
that's great. That's good. The brother is going to protect the sister, so that's amazing. Yes. Listen, I want to talk to you about your relationship with the UFC now, because there's a lot of things happened in the last year. As everybody know, that UFC 199, you got like a UFC lifetime ban, and that was like incorrect from a lot of people. And recently in June, you got a lifetime lift. So a lot of people don't know what's going on right now, because we read that on the media, we read that on the web. But what is your relationship with the UFC now?
Well, Patrick, I like that you're going straight for the hard questions right away.
Let's go.
Yeah, I like it. So my relationship, I think, is fine. I mean, of course, the UFC is now owned by a new group, WME IMG. They're the principal owners. And I haven't really met anyone from there. When the incident happened at UFC 199 in June in Inglewood, California, it was still, the Fertitta brothers and whatnot. And, I always thought I had a good relationship with them. I mean, I've always had a closer relationship with Dana White than Lorenzo. And Frank Fertitta was kind of invisible for most of the time. But then, it was. I was actually just thinking about this day a couple of days ago. It was the most surreal experience of my life, because I never thought that would happen, and I definitely never thought that the reaction to the news would ever happen. I mean, when Dana kicked me out of the arena and said that I was banned, I thought that was going to be my new life. The new label put on me. I'm the guy who was banned for a ridiculous reason. And then the reaction from the fans, from the fighters, from the media was just unbelievable. And I truly believe that they're the reason why I was allowed back, so to speak. So since then, it's fine. I've been to many events. I went to 200, 201, 202, 203. I mean, I've been to a bunch, and they've been all fine with me. I mean, I think that most of the people who work for the UFC didn't agree with it. I think it was just one or two people who wanted to do this to me. And unfortunately, a lot of those people are gone now because the new owners have let go so many employees. But I hope that the new ownership group, we can have a good relationship and we can avoid situations like this. Yeah,
we're going to talk a little bit later about the new owners. But you know what? When you got banned, it's kind of weird because it's because you were reporting that Brock Lesnar is going to come back at UFC 200 and you broke the news, but it's kind of your job to do that. This is your job to break some news and to have advantage to the other competitor, to launch the news first and to go not secretly but to go deeper with your information and just to put that everywhere.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I know you're a big sports fan. You like the Seahawks, right? I mean, you probably follow a lot of sports guys on Twitter and read their stories. I mean, that is something that is done every single day, 365 days a year. Sports journalism, we have insiders, reporters in basketball, baseball, hockey. Bob McKenzie is such a famous guy in Canada for hockey, and there are so many others. So I wasn't reporting anything that was negative about the UFC or anything that someone told me specifically, hey, you can't report this, and then I went and betrayed their trust and reported it anyway. I mean, I found the news, I confirmed it, and I ended up being right, and they didn't like the fact that I was kind of spoiling the announcement. But I would argue vehemently that I wasn't spoiling anything. People were just as excited when the news broke, when I broke the news, and then when the announcement was made, as they would have been had they not known the news from me first, and then just seeing the announcement on TV. No one didn't buy UFC 200 to watch Brock Lesnar because I broke the news first. So it was a ridiculous, reaction, and I think they recognized that because they lifted the ban 48 hours later.
Yeah, you're totally right. But you know what? You broke a lot of news in your career, and a lot of people, don't understand how you do it because, you've been in the business since a long time. You have a lot of confidence from the others. So how you do it, man? How you do it that you're like 95% of the time you are the first one to break the news?
That's 100%.
Why? Yeah, that's
100%. So the main secret, it's not that difficult. The only thing is it's relationships, right?
Yep.
I try to be fair and accurate and have good relationships with everyone in the sport, from the coaches to the managers to the fighters, of course, to their spouses. I mean, I try to know as many people as possible because everyone is a source. Everyone is someone that you can learn something from. And I also, I try to keep in contact with as many. It's hard to talk to all the fighters in the UFC every day, every week, because there's so many. But I try to keep in contact with as many people as possible, as regularly as possible. And when I hear a piece of information, I don't just run with it right away, because sometimes someone tells you something and it's wrong. I always try to double, at least, or triple check, from different sources to make sure, okay, this is right, because I never want to be wrong. The audience, the readers, the people at home, the viewers, they expect me to be right. And if I tell them something and it ends up being wrong, then I'm losing their trust. And I also don't want to break the trust of the people who are telling me information. If someone tells me something and says, but you can't hear it from me, it has to be, anonymous, whatever, because they don't want to get in trouble for who knows what reason. They have to believe that I'm going to keep my word, that I'm not going to break that trust. And I feel like I've never done that. And it's very important for me to have that respect from the fighters, to have that respect from the sources, from the managers, to always have that good relationship. I mean, I know at times people aren't going to be happy with me for a question or something that I said, but it's really important for me to have a good relationship with everyone that I cover, and that's the number one thing, to have that respect.
Yeah, talking about respect and trust, on your show, the MMA Hours, you always have the biggest star in the business, and those stars are feel in trust with you because they're not shy to to share the information, and they're not shy to broke the news on your show, like Ariel Faber did a couple of weeks ago, that he told on your show that he's gonna retire on the next fight. This is big, and they're waiting to be on your show to announce those big news. Why exactly do you think it happening? Just because, like you said, you build the trust between all the fighters and the community of the MMA community during all those years? Or what is the main reason, do you think, that all those stars going to your show and they go free and they're not scared to share the information?
That is a really good question. You know, I don't know, maybe it's a mix of things. I mean, the show has been around for 7.5 years, and I really, really try hard. I mean, it's something that I'm really proud of, but it's also kind of a big pain in the ass every week too, to try to book the show, as you know now, you know, having your own show, because, you know, you're always trying to get big guests. You have to make sure that they actually show up, that they don't bail on you, and all this stuff. You're always trying to get, you know, the most interesting people out there, the most newsworthy people out there. And, you know, a lot of times when people come on the show, like with Uriah Faber, I didn't know that he was going to announce that. Yeah. But hopefully they think that, okay, this is a big platform. There's a lot of people that are going to see this. This is a good way for me to break this news. And, you know, it's something that I'm really proud of because, as you know, it's an internet show. And in this day and age, I mean, everything is available everywhere. But, you know, I'm not ESPN or any big outlet, but they still feel like, okay, this is the best place for me to break this news. And I think part of that comes from, you know, developing those relationships, you know, having that trust, having that rapport with the fighters, and also just kind of being there for so long. I mean, I think that they, you know, I would hope that they, you know, would believe that, okay, if I'm going to come on Ariel's show and break this news, he's going to ask me good questions. He's going to treat this, you know, with the proper care and not ask me stupid questions and make me sound dumb and not put me in an uncomfortable spot. I mean, I take a lot of pride in how I ask questions and, you know, just my preparation and things like that. Just like a fighter, you know, you don't want to go into a cage and look out of shape and look like you're not doing, you know, any good training and you don't know what the heck you're doing in the fight. So that's the way I view it as well. I mean, that when the lights go on, when the show starts, that's my opportunity to show people that, you know, I'm hopefully the best, and, you know, these people are making the right decision by coming on my show.
Yeah, you're in the business since so many years. How many years exactly are you in the business now?
I mean, professionally, 2007, I started my own website. I called it JarryPark.com because I was such a big fan of the Montreal Expos. And, you know, there's a Jarry Park in Montreal. And I was just so surprised that no one bought the URL, JarryPark.com. So I just bought it so I can have it. And then I would put interviews on the site every morning with different fighters. And then in 2008, I got a job. So when I was doing the JarryPark.com, I wasn't getting paid, and I gave myself 6 months to get noticed. I said, okay, I want to be an MMA journalist. I'm going to do this for 6 months. I'm going to interview fighters every day, you know, not make any money, and hopefully someone will see my work and actually, you know, give me a job doing this. And with 3 days left on my deadline in March of 2008, I ended up getting a job from a news site called MMArated.com. And the first event that I went to was UFC 83 in Montreal, the first event in Montreal. So it was weird that it was the first UFC in Montreal, and, you know, that was kind of the first one that I covered. So it's been since, you know, October of 2007 that I've really devoted my life to MMA journalism.
So you're in the business since 10 years. During all those years, you got just so many interviews with the best, and you broke a lot of news, and sometimes it was unexpected from your guests on your show. What is the biggest scoop you ever had during all those years? You know, even if it's come from a guest or you were the first one to broke the news. What is, in your mind, the biggest news that you ever broke in these last 10 years?
That is a tough question, but the first thing that came to mind was the fact that you know, the story that Zuffa purchased Strikeforce. This was in March of 2011, and no one saw this coming. And, you know, Dana White gave me the first interview and, you know, gave me the scoop, and it was huge for me because it just came out of nowhere. I remember...
Yeah, you didn't know. You didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. And we posted this interview on a Saturday afternoon, and it felt like the entire MMA world just got turned upside down. And a lot of the Strikeforce fighters, and most of them actually, had no idea this was happening. I would say the majority of them. And I think it's important to talk about that because a lot of people think that me and Dana have this bad relationship, and I don't really know deep down what he thinks of me at the moment. But I have a lot of respect for him, and I owe him a lot. And I actually said this to him the night of UFC 199 when he was telling me to leave. I was like, if it wasn't for Dana White, I wouldn't be in this position. I wouldn't be who I am. Mm-hmm. He gave me a lot of opportunities. He opened a lot of doors for me. He was very kind to me when I was, very small in the sport, and that's just another example of that. Also, I broke the news that the WEC and UFC were going to merge, and that was a year before. So there's been a lot of big ones. I mean, the Brock one was kind of big, too, because it led to all this craziness, but the first one that comes to mind is probably the Strikeforce purchase in March of 2011.
Yeah, that was from the Fertitta brothers, and now we have new owners in the business. A lot of things change right now by the new owners, and as we can see that in the last couple of weeks, a lot of people got fired. A lot of the image, the face of the business behind the drape changed a lot. What do you think about what's going on right now, and what do you think it's gonna happen in a couple of years, especially next year, because it's gonna be the first year under the color of the new owners. So what do you think about what's going on right now? Because it looks like from the outside it looks like a little mess, like everywhere now.
Yeah. Anytime a huge company like WME, IMG buys another company like Zuffa, there's going to be this sort of uneasiness. There's going to be a state of transition. And, if anyone thought that they weren't going to come in and, bring in their own people and let other people go, I think they were fooling themselves.
Yeah.
This was expected. What wasn't really expected, at least for me, was maybe the way it was handled. I don't think in hindsight it was handled very well from both sides. To announce the news that the company had been sold, the Monday after UFC 200, and you remember UFC 200 was kind of a mess with the John Jones situation, and I think a lot of those people were kind of mentally exhausted, and now here you have, Lorenzo telling these employees who've worked so hard, okay, we just sold the company for $4 billion, many of whom don't even get a cut of that money, I think was a very deflating thing. And from what I was told, for the next 3 months or so from a lot of employees was that the morale at the UFC headquarters in Las Vegas was very low because a lot of them were expecting to lose their jobs. And so it dragged on. They never heard from any of the new owners. They weren't really told what was to come. And then, one morning in October, a lot of them start losing their jobs in a very impersonal way. There's no really good way to let someone go, but I just don't know if they did it the best way possible. Now, I don't begrudge them. I don't fault them for doing this. They're allowed to do it. If you buy a new house, you're going to put your own little touches on it. You're going to do whatever you want. I just think maybe they could have handled it a little better. And now there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't think the UFC is going away. I think for the fans, the good news is these people paid a lot of money for the organization. They paid $4 billion for it, and they need to try to get that money back. They need to make good on their investment.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think that they're going to try to put on the biggest fights possible. They're going to, Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor. The George St. Pierre thing is crazy to me because he falls under a big fight. So I think for the fans, there's nothing really to worry about. I think for the employees, there's a lot to worry about because I think that over time they're going to keep bringing in their own people, and soon the company, the infrastructure, it's going to look completely different. But as far as the product is concerned, I actually think that they're going to try to make it bigger and better. I'm not a huge fan of the Reebok deal. I don't think it's fair. I think that a lot is changing in front of our eyes as far as, talk of unions and collective bargaining. The sport is really changing. I think in 20, 30 years, we're going to look back on this time and say, wow, I can't believe the sport was being done this way. I can't believe the fighters were getting this little money. I can't believe they were being treated this way. And I hope it happens soon because I personally think that the fighters deserve a lot better than what you're getting.
But do you really think that the union is going to happen? It's going to happen soon?
Well, I think it depends on you guys, the fighters, but I think it should happen. I think that you guys need a better system in place. I'll say that because there's so much money on the table that you're not getting that you should be getting. I mean, if you just look at the NBA, look at what happened this summer in the NBA. The NBA has a new TV deal worth multi-billions of dollars, and as a result of the players having an association, having collective bargaining, and getting 50% of the revenue, the salary cap went way up, and all the players started to get a whole lot more money. I mean, you guys would just be getting a base salary no matter what, just being in the UFC from the TV deal alone. We're just talking the TV deal. We're not talking about, the Reebok deal. Let's just talk about the United States TV deal. Currently, the UFC gets around $100 million from Fox.
Yep.
In 2 years, that contract is up. They're hoping to get $400 million. If you guys, got 10% of that, that would be, a very nice base salary. That's on top of whatever your purses, sponsors, things like that. You don't make any money off the TV deal. How come? I mean, the only reason why there is a TV deal, the only reason why anyone wants to buy the UFC product and put it on their airwaves is because of the fighters. If there's no fighters, there's no UFC. So why aren't you guys making that money? So I think over time, the fighters are getting smarter, the managers are getting smarter, and if I'm being honest, I think a lot of the blame has to go on the managers, because the managers were the ones telling their fighters, sign this Reebok addendum, sign this USADA addendum. They weren't asking questions about the TV deal and things like that. I think a lot of the managers were just trying to be friends with the UFC and hoping to get the bonuses and things like that. So look, the sport was young. A lot has changed. A lot will change. I think a lot of lessons were learned. But I really do think that you guys need to be more united in your front. And that doesn't mean that, you have to always be on the same page with everything. But I think in the end, you'll all make more money if you're on the same page.
Yeah, but there's more and more fighters going public right now with all of that.
Yeah.
Cowboy Cerrone said he's going to be happy to be the face of the union. There's Tim Kennedy said that his next fight, he better have a title fight or a better pay. And the Reebok deal, that's the major part why George is not back yet, because there's a lot of money involved. And there's Lauren Larkins is going, he's free agent now, and he said that the first offer from the UFC he got, that was like a slap in his face. So this is, money is always been a big problem, but now it's public now. The fighters are not scared anymore. It looks like they're less scared to talk about it and to have consequence, because I think because of Scott Coker a little bit, because Coker is doing some pretty good thing with Bellator. It's not the same value about doing a Bellator fighter than a UFC fighter, but now a lot of people is watching on the other side and watching that how much money they can make with the sponsors and what the opportunity they can have with the money. And it's not about who's they're gonna fight next, it's all about how much they're gonna make. So do you think in this case it's a big, or it's an advantage a little bit, or the Bellator is gonna take advantage of that in the future?
Yeah, 100%. I think you're right. I mean, the rise of Bellator has helped. I think free agency has been big. The fact that there is another place where people can go, and the fact that Bellator is kind of structured right now completely differently than the UFC, in the sense that you can have your own sponsors, and there's a lot of other things that you don't have to deal with. I think that's a very attractive place. I think there's three main reasons why we're starting to see a lot of fighters speak up. And you're right. I mean, seeing Donald Cerrone at a UFC scheduled media event, in front of UFC PR talk about a union is kind of a surreal thing, because for so long people were afraid to talk about this in any interview setting, let alone a UFC setting. I think that the fact that the Fertittas are gone, there's no connection to these new owners. The fact that a number has been put on this sport. We never really knew what anything was worth. We didn't know the pay-per-view numbers. We didn't know the revenue. We didn't know anything because it was all private. But now we know $4 billion. I think that set a light off in many people's eyes, and they were like, "Wait a second, this sport is worth $4 billion, and I'm only getting 50 and 50 or whatever in these main event fights. This doesn't really make any sense." So I think that really opened people's eyes. I think introducing the Reebok deal and the USADA deal, and just becoming a lot more educated when it comes to all this stuff, the finances. I think that's helped a lot. And believe it or not, I really think Conor McGregor has changed a lot of this. I think the way he's talked about money, the way he's handled his career, I think has given a lot of people, some confidence to speak up as well, because look what's happened to him. Yeah. I mean, you think about it, a couple of years ago, remember when you were let go from the UFC and you had to work your ass off to get back? You were fighting, I remember you fought in Brazil, you fought everywhere. You just wanted to get that opportunity. You wanted to be with the best, and you deserve to be with the best. Well, you were in the UFC for years, a reality show, all this stuff. You did everything that they asked you to. And then they say goodbye, and what did you have to show for it? You didn't get any pension. You didn't get anything. I mean, all you got was, okay, goodbye, and you have to fight on these smaller shows to work your way up. And I feel like there needs to be a better system in play. I feel like this system for the veterans, for the guys who have fought multiple years, if you come in one fight and you lose, okay, that's going to happen. There's young guys, you work your way back up. But if you're a veteran and you fought for the belt and you've done a lot of things, multiple times, I mean, it's to me, it's not right. So it's interesting to see fighters start to speak up finally. And I think the fact that, the Fertittas are gone, Dana White is less hands-on, they're less scared. And I wish, it's amazing to me, like I talk to so many fighters and managers about just their fights, little things like, oh, I'm fighting UFC 207. Oh, but you can't report it. They're going to get mad. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? They're going to get mad. I mean, this is news. What are they going to do to you? Kick you off the card? You're the main event. What's going to happen to you? There needs to stop. Everyone needs to be so scared. They're the stars. You're the stars. Without you guys, there is no sport. And I think fighters need to start realizing that.
Yeah, because when you talk about your first fight in the UFC want to compare themselves to the NFL, the NBA, the MLB. But you fight the first fight in the UFC, you make 8-8. So if you lose, you made $8,000 without tax, without percentage of your manager, the gym fees, all those things. You finish with $2,000 in your pocket. It's impossible to train full time and be very competitive at this level if you have one or two jobs on the side and trying to train and beat those guys who are able to train full time. So this is you're totally right. This is a risky business because, like you said, we don't have welfare, we don't have insurance, big insurance that to protect ourselves if we get hurt from for a couple years and all those things. So you have to be very very smart with the money you make. But you know what, you were talking about TV deal. There's a very not a lot of people who got like pay-per-view percentage, and this is where they make a lot of money, because instead of that, like you said, the television fees, it's not on our side. I have to talk to you about George. You're from Montreal, and you know that here in Montreal you have George and you have Jesus right before after. George is a big star. It looks like It looks like an American soap. This is unfinished business, and it looks like it's never gonna end, because one of the two parts gonna have to let go something. And now George is working with the lawyer Quinn, who's well known about the sport contract in the NBA and MLB. And now with the new owner, that it's not only two guys who's running the business, it's companies. So what do you think is gonna happen soon? Because it looks like they're going in a law fight, a very bad one.
Yeah, what an unfortunate situation, because I think the world of George. He's done so much for the sport worldwide, not just in Canada. He's always been so professional. He's always been so respectful. I mean, I remember when he used to show up to the press conferences wearing suits, and he was the only one, and now everyone wears suits. And he was, he was the best in his weight class, and I think arguably the greatest of all time, regardless of weight class. And so, he leaves, and everyone tries to find out if he's coming back. He's not sure. We're talking about it for 3 years, and finally he says, I'm ready to come back. Great. Could you imagine, Michael Jordan, ready to come back? The Chicago Bulls are like, nah, we don't want to pay you. It's not. I mean, what are you talking about? This is Michael Jordan. This is one of the greatest people to ever do this sport. And
history.
Yes, it's unbelievable. So I think there's a few things at play here. I think the Reebok and Under Armour issue. He's sponsored by Under Armour. He had a contract that he signed in 2011. I think there's 4 fights left on it. But here's the weird thing: like, they froze that contract when he gave up his belt in 2013 after the Johnny Hendricks fight. Okay, so the contract gets frozen, so he can't go fight for anyone else. I get that, but the sport has drastically changed since he fought in 2013. There was no Reebok deal back then. So he's losing out on a lot of money.
Yeah.
He's not the champion anymore, so he doesn't get pay-per-view points. Which, by the way, I think it's crazy that you have to only be a champion to get pay-per-view points. There's a lot of fighters who aren't champions, who are big draws, who can't get pay-per-view points, and I think they deserve it. So, you know, there's a few things, and also one thing that hasn't been talked about a lot, he's represented by CAA, and the new owners of the UFC are WME. WME and CAA are big rivals, and they don't usually sit down at the table and talk to each other and make deals. It's a very awkward thing. So, you know, to me, I mean, it was such a perfect situation to have him come back to Toronto, have him fight on that card. I think that card is a bit shallow, if I'm being honest. I mean, I think the top two fights are great. I think the Cub Swanson, Korean Superboy fight is great. I think the Misha Serkinov fight is great, but it's missing, you know, it's missing George St. Pierre, if I'm being honest.
It's only great. You know, after 3 years, there's no show in Toronto. We're expected something bigger than that. You know, I mean, there's a light heavyweight championship. It's awesome, but you know, that's like you said, it's great. That's it. It's just great.
Yeah, but and also look at the top four the top four fighters: Cormier, Johnson, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis. They have nothing to do with Toronto. They have nothing to do with Canada. I mean, you know, it's not going to do very well at the gate, and I don't think it's going to do very well on pay-per-view because it's sandwiched between 205, which is fantastic, and 207, which is fantastic. It's the same month as 207. You know, you can't expect people to pay an extra $60 on top of the $120 they're going to pay for 205 and 207, surely, just for a kind of subpar card. If George was on, I think they would have gladly paid that $60. So, to me, like, the fact that he was ready to come back and for whatever reason they couldn't get it done is just an unfortunate situation. It really is. It makes me sad that, you know, the guy is ready to resume his career and for finances it can't be done. And I know that there's, you know, a little bit here. I'm not saying any side is wrong or right, but the fact that they couldn't come together and figure this out to me is just mind-blowing. So hopefully, you know, if it's not the UFC, he can go fight elsewhere. I think if he wants to go fight elsewhere, you know, it's going to be a tough battle. I think they're going to fight him in court, and they're going to spend a lot of money. And, you know, it could be like the Randy Couture situation all over again, you know, where he just kind of gives up. And you know, hopefully he doesn't just end his career like this, because I think that would be a real shame.
Yeah, but like he said on the interview that he was very close to a done deal with the Fertitas brothers, and the deal was on the table, and that was almost done deal. And when the company got sold and the deal wasn't there anymore because the new owners said that it's not gonna work like that. So it's kind of I don't know if it's true or it's like a strategy to negotiating, but if it's true, that's a shame. Like you said, that they was very close to have the best welterweight in the history of the sport coming back. Yes, it's after 3 years, but even that, everybody's tired to listen to the story. Everybody's tired to talking about that.
Yeah.
We just want the end of that story, and we had a chance to have him in Toronto, but it's not gonna happen. And like you said, Toronto card, it's not gonna do well at the gate and that pay-per-view. And once again, it's Canada's gonna take the blame, and you know, it's gonna be hard to coming back in Canada. And don't know if they're ever gonna come back in Montreal without George, because the last fight, the last UFC in Montreal, that was horrible. That was a nightmare at the gate. So we'll see what's gonna happen in the future with Canada.
You know that card 186, which was, you know, last April. To me, it was the most depressing event that I've ever covered. I couldn't believe that the top half of the Bell Center was completely tarped off. You know, being there for UFC 124 when George fought Koscheck, and, you know, we remember 83, even 97, you know, was a big event, and 113 without, you know, any Canadian. You know, they at least put together big cards, and to go to that show and see that the Bell Center was half empty, when I know that Montreal is a great MMA market, that the fans care, it was so depressing as a Montrealer, because I knew that Montreal would get blamed for this and punished, and that they wouldn't be coming back anytime soon.
My last question, because before we're gonna break that to UFC 205, I want to talk to you about the ranking. Because there's a lot of controversy about the ranking. Fighters are not happy about their rank in any weight class. And, you know, the pound-per-pound fighter in the world, the first one, it's more personal than, you know, the real ranking. And a lot of people knows that it's from journalists. It's from MMA journalists who's doing that. Are you involved in that? Are you involved of doing rankings?
No way. I'm not involved in that. If you're referring to the UFC rankings, I'm not involved in that. I personally never really liked doing. I used to do rankings for the other website that I worked for, NBCSports.com and Versus. But I never really liked it because I thought to myself, like, who am I to rank these fighters? Like, you know, what the hell? Why should I be doing this? You know, it's not fair to them and it's disrespectful. And, you know, I'm okay with, you know, if you get a group of journalists, maybe 10, 20, and then you take the consensus, you'll have a good, you know, you'll have a good idea of, you know, who's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But the UFC came up with this, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, and it was really Fox that wanted it. Fox wanted it. You know, for the longest time, the UFC always said, we're never going to do rankings because they'll only give us headaches. But Fox really wanted it because when they could do commercials, they could say, oh, this fight is number 1 versus number 2, 3 versus 4, etc. It's a good way to sell the fight, even though the casual audience may not know who the fighters are. So they invited all the media to be a part of it. But the problem was they invited way too many media members, like people who they thought they were trying to sort of, you know, get cozy up with and make them interested in the sport. So they're inviting people that don't know anything about MMA.
Yeah,
so
that's the thing, because
people.
Yeah, because the most influenced MMA journalists are not involved in the ranking.
None. Yeah, you could go on UFC.com/rankings right now and look at who's a part of the rankings, and I guarantee you will have not heard of 95%, if not more, of these people. I mean, I don't even know who these people are, and this is my job.
Yeah.
So, like, I did it once or twice maybe, but then I quickly realized that the whole thing was, you know, it was problematic, and also I didn't like the way the UFC, I mean, the UFC, it's crazy, like, they want us to do these rankings, so if they want to have rankings, they need to be completely out of it. It has to be completely independent. It's not independent. They took Nate Diaz out of the rankings because he turned down one fight. Yeah. And they had like someone like Dominic Cruz, who I have a lot of respect for. He didn't fight for 3 years and he was still ranked. And they've done this many times before. So once they started using it as, you know, a bargaining tool, and once I realized that a lot of, I mean, they make no sense because it's being done by people who don't really follow the sport. You know, often what happens is someone fights this weekend and then they'll like jump him over someone else who that guy may have just lost to in his last fight. You know, I think of like Kelvin Gastelum and Neil Magny. The whole thing makes no sense, and it bothers me that people put so much stock in them. And the UFC will use it to their advantage. So they'll say, I remember when Benson Henderson was trying to get a new contract, they're like, oh, well, you're ranked 13th in the lightweight division. And of course, that's a crazy statement. He's much better than 13, but it was because he was fighting at welterweight recently, so his stock was almost split. And some people were putting him in welterweight, some people were putting him in lightweight, so he was low in both weight classes. But then if another person is like super high, they'll completely ignore that. So it's a mess, and I wish people would stop, you know, paying attention to it. But unfortunately, it was you know, introduced for TV purposes, and it turned into this whole mess.
I'm very happy to hear that from you, because, you know, like you said, every time I'm going to check who's involved in the ranking, I have no idea who those guys are, and it's kind of tricky because not a lot of fighters are really happy about the ranking. So now I'm gonna keep you a little bit more on that interview, because I wanted to break down the UFC 205 a little bit with you, with a couple fights. This is a big show. This is probably the biggest show of the year, because, like you said, UFC 200 was it was a mess, and the fights were the pre-fight, the prelim was awesome, but the main card was a little bit so. But on that card at the Madison Square Garden, November 12th, it looks like, on paper, it looks like an amazing fight card.
Yeah, I can't wait. I mean, so I grew up a huge fan of the New York Knicks, and to me, Madison Square Garden, where they play, I mean, that was the most magical arena in the world. I still remember the first time that I got to go there, March 11th, 1995. I went to see the Knicks against the Supersonics, and it was just like, I felt like I was in, you know, some kind of church, or the most holy place in the world. So all these years living in New York, I lived in New York for 14 years, and, you know, I've been to Knicks games and all kinds of sporting events there. The best acts, the best performers all come to Madison Square Garden. To me, it is the world's most famous arena, and it was crazy that mixed martial arts and the UFC in particular couldn't go there. We all know now, it really had nothing to do with the sport. It had a lot to do with politics and culinary union and all this nonsense.
Yeah.
So now that's over. And for the longest time, Lorenzo Fertitta said that if they do get legalized in New York State again, that they would bring, a massive card to MSG for the first show. And they've definitely backed it up. I mean, 3 title fights, fantastic matchups. I mean, to me, the only kind of disappointing thing a little bit is the fact that there's very few New Yorkers on the card. I wish the Ally Quinta situation didn't happen. I wish, guys like Aljamain Sterling and John Vellante, like the real New Yorkers who never got to fight at home were on the card, but hopefully for the next one they'll be on, and some of them are fighting in Albany a few weeks later. Other than that, I mean, no complaints whatsoever. Connor's on the card. History could be made.
Yep.
Eddie defending his title for the first time. Joanna, Woodley, Thompson is. I mean, there's really nothing not to like about it on paper. So I give them a lot of credit for staying true to their word and bringing a massive, massive Super Bowl-like card to MSG for the first time.
Yeah, like you say, history can be made by McGregor. But let's talk about a little bit about the prelims. The fight who is I'm most exciting about, I think it's Frankie Edgar, Jeremy Stephens. I think that can be the fight of the night because of the style of both. Jeremy Stephens is always going forward. He's trying to knock you out every time. And Frank Edgar is like the Rocky, and he's like Rocky Balboa. He's always taking punishment, but always able to come back with the win. And he's fighting at home at New York. So what do you think about that fight? And what is your fight on the prelim that you're gonna check for?
So I really like that fight a lot for a few reasons, because Frankie Edgar, I think, had a disappointing performance in his last fight against Jose Aldo, and I think that he kind of got the short end of the stick, because when he knocked out Chad Mendes, we all thought that he was going to fight Conor, and it just never really happened for him. So I'm curious to see how he rebounds. He's not from New York, but he's from New Jersey, and I know this has always been a big dream of his to fight at MSG. So he's going to be the fan favorite. It's a fun stylistic matchup, as you said. On the feet, on the ground. Frankie's wrestling is obviously very good, but he's turned into one of the best boxers as well. And I think Mark Henry, his coach, deserves a lot of credit for that. And Jeremy Stephens, one of the hardest hitting fighters in that weight class. Also, I'm curious about how Jeremy Stephens is next week. With the media and stuff, because if you saw the press conference, the initial one with Conor,
he broke him.
It was kind of and I and a lot of my colleagues have tried to talk to him since, and he refuses to talk to anyone. And I think that was actually a mistake. Like, for me, if I'm Jeremy Stephens, I run with that. And now you're in the Conor McGregor discussion. So if you beat Frankie Edgar on November 12th, you get on the microphone and say, "Hey, Conor, I'll show you who I am. You don't know who I am. I'll show you who I am. Like, let's fight. Are you scared? Whatever." So I think it was a mistake to not speak, but I'm curious to see how he's going to be mentally next week as well. So yeah, I agree with you. I love that fight. I mean, to me, it's always a treat to watch Khabib Nurmagomedov, because I kind of feel like he's the best lightweight in the world. Unfortunately, injuries have stopped him from getting a title shot, and other issues as well. It was kind of a mess as well with Eddie and Conor and all that stuff. But the fact that he's healthy, he's in New York, he's looking good. I'm curious to see how he does against Michael Johnson, who had an amazing knockout. Michael Johnson is kind of a hard guy to figure out, because
you never know. You never know which one's gonna show on the fight.
Right. Sometimes he looks like a world beater, and his hand speed is just amazing, and he can punch really hard. He can finish, and then sometimes, like in the Nate Diaz fight, I mean, he just looks kind of lost. And Nate had something to do with that as well, but it just feels like he wins a few and then he'll lose one and not look good and then have to get back on track. So I like that fight, and I'm also really curious to see how Rashad Evans looks at 185. I know I'm going through most of them here, but Rashad at 185 is crazy. I mean, he started at heavyweight in the UFC, became light heavyweight champion, and I spoke to him on my show a couple months ago, and he told me that after his fight against Glover Teixeira, when he was knocked out in April, he went and ran for like 4 miles that night on the treadmill, just to sort of clear his mind and figure out what he wanted to do. And I'm always a little bit weary of guys who, lose, later on in their career and get knocked out like that, and then they make that 20-pound weight cut. I'm like, oh man, that's a lot to handle as well. And Kennedy, he hasn't fought in a long time. because he's had his own issues with the UFC and whatnot, and his last fight against Yoel Romero was a controversial one. So that one is very interesting. And also, they're former teammates. They used to train together at Jackson, so that's interesting too.
And on the main card, we have, I don't know if it's the first time, but I didn't say that a lot of time, the 6 fights on the main card.
Yeah.
This is how big New York card is going to be. 6 fights on the main card. You got Tate versus Pennington. Tate is coming back from the title loss. Pennington, good momentum, 3 wins in a row. Cerrone versus Gastelum. A little bit sad that we don't have Lawler, but Gastelum is a tough competitor.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's not, there's not a lot not to like about this main card.
Yeah.
Just if you forget about the 3 title fights, which I all think are great matchups. I mean, Joanna Carolina is fantastic. I love the Woodley Thompson fight, which is a bit flying under the radar, but to me, I think Stephen Thompson is one of the very best fighters at 170, and I like how Woodley has like this chip on his shoulder now, and trying to get respect from people. But the one of the rest of those main card fights that I'm really looking forward to is Chris Weidman versus Yoel Romero, because I talked about there not being a lot of New Yorkers. I mean, Chris Weidman was someone who made a lot of trips to Albany to try to get MMA legalized, to lobby on behalf of the UFC. He's from Long Island. We haven't seen him since his loss to Luke Rockhold at 194 in December, so it's been 11 months since we've seen him, amazingly. And he had that neck surgery. He was supposed to fight in June. He's fighting another guy who had neck surgery a couple of years ago, Yoel Romero, who had his own issues, fought on that same card, won a controversial decision over Jacare, got suspended for 6 months. To me, this could be a massive moment for Weidman, because I think if he wins, and the Garden is going to go crazy for him because he's the New York guy, I think he's going to come across like a big star, and I would suspect that he's going to get the title shot as a result of that, because I think there's a lot of heat between him and Michael Bisping as well. So this is a huge opportunity.
You think he's going to pass over Jacare with a win?
I think so. From a business standpoint, I think that the UFC, it would lean towards Weidman. I think that he speaks English. He's got the story. He's the former champion. I think Jacare deserves it. I wish Bisping and Jacare were fighting in Toronto. I think that would have helped that card out a lot. But I think if Weidman has a good win, a solid win, an impressive win over Romero, he's going to come across like a very, very big deal. And I think then that will put him in the driver's seat.
And very quick, because I took a lot of your time, and I want to thank you for that.
No problem.
Let's go with the 3 title fight. What do you think is going to come with the win on that fight? I don't know if you can make prediction, but what do you think about Alvarez McGregor, Woodley Thompson, and Jurček and Kovalkiewicz? Very, very quick one, and why?
Yeah, it's funny. I used to make predictions a lot, but then fighters used to get mad at me and say, like, oh, you picked against me. So I'm like, oh, this is not worth it, because like I want to talk to you guys. I want to do interviews. I don't need to make predictions.
Yeah, that's why I said that.
Yeah. So I try to stay away from the predictions, but I think they're fantastic fights. I mean, Conor at 155, I think, is his best weight. I think he's most healthy and natural at 155. I think Eddie is feeling the fact that a lot of people are picking against him. I think stylistically it's a great fight as well. I mean, are we going to see the Eddie Alvarez who fought Anthony Pettis and just kind of try to neutralize him, or is he going to come out like the Eddie in Bellator, like guns blazing against Conor? Is Conor in his head? Is Conor fighting too often? I mean, not that long ago he fought against Nate Diaz in a 5-round war, and here he is 3 months later, less than 3 months later, fighting, trying to make history. So I'm very curious about that. Joanna,
he need money, man. His lifestyle is like over his head.
Yeah,
so he need money.
No, it's amazing though, because remember he was the one that was limping badly after that because of all the leg kicks. But Joanna Jędrzejczyk, to me, is one of the most fascinating people in the sport. Undefeated, so dominant, so much fun to watch. Her striking is just unbelievable, and this is kind of a civil war, Poland versus Poland. I wonder if it's a little too soon for Carolina. She's only been in the UFC for like a year, less than a year, and Joanna's fought in front of 55,000 people in Melbourne. She's had big moments. This is going to be a very big deal, and Carolina's so nice. She's so soft-spoken. I just wonder if this is going to be a little too big for her. We'll see. She looked very good against Rose Namajunas in July. And then, like I said, I mean, I know you know a lot about Wonder Boy. I just think he's so dynamic on his feet, and now training a lot with Chris Weidman, he's become a much better wrestler.
Yep.
And I think that's made him very dangerous. His performance against Rory, while not the flashiest, I thought was one of his most impressive to neutralize Rory like that. And I think Woodley's one of the hardest hitters in the sport, has a big chip on his shoulder. There's a lot of bad blood there, so I love it. I'm getting very excited just talking to you about it. I wish it was Saturday already.
Amazing. Ariel, I want to say merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that time. Yeah, that was a long interview, but man, that was I could talk to you for 24 hours. That was amazing. I want to say thank you very much, and people can follow you on your show on the MMA Hours, and it's amazing. Once again, merci beaucoup.
Listen, Patrick, honestly, a huge honor for me. I mean, I remember watching you before I got in this sport, when you fought Tito. And, I remember actually when you fought Anderson, it was my honeymoon, and I was so upset that I couldn't be there to cover it. So, I mean, you've been a huge part of the reason why I love this sport, and you represented Montreal and Canada so well. So, for me, it was an honor that you asked me to be on, and anytime you need anything from me, like you've done for me, I'll always be there.
All right. Thank you very much.